Hello, my name is Cecilia, and a few months ago, my own sister, my flight attendant sister, stood over me in front of a full plane of strangers and screamed, "You're just a maid! How dare you sit in first class?" Then she slapped me, not out of anger, but out of certainty, certainty that no one would care. And maybe she was right, because this wasn't the first time they'd tried to erase me. They called it business, said I was too emotional, too quiet to lead. They took my name off what I built, locked it behind smiles and paperwork, and expected me to thank them for crumbs. But that morning, I made a call. And 10 minutes later, the airline began to fall apart. What happens when the person they buried is the one who designed the system? Would you stay silent or start pulling threads? It was a Thursday morning, one of those quiet, blue-lit kinds where the airport feels more like a hospital than a gateway to anywhere hopeful. Houston was already humid. I could feel it in my knees, in the way the air clung to my skin as I stepped onto the jet bridge. Gate B7, Flight 642, Atlanta bound. I didn't expect anything, maybe just a smooth ride and a cup of lukewarm coffee. That's all I was asking for. I boarded with the group before final call, kept my head down, and found my seat without any trouble. First class, seat 2A. I didn't flaunt it. No makeup, no designer anything. Just jeans, a soft sweatshirt, and my mother's old chain around my neck. The charm was tiny. Silver. A faint engraving on it. CQ. I wore it often, but not for show. It was the only thing of hers they hadn't taken. I sank into the plush leather, careful not to look anyone in the eye. A man in a navy blazer across the aisle gave me a once-over and then went back to his email. Good. That's how I wanted it. Quiet, simple, anonymous. Until I saw her. Valora. She walked down the aisle with that gait she practiced in heels since we were teenagers. Confident, deliberate, like she owned whatever space she walked into. Her blonde streaked bun was tight, uniform crisp, clipboard clutched like a badge of honor. She wasn't supposed to be on this flight. She froze when she spotted me. Her eyes scanned down, sweatshirt, sneakers, no makeup, and her mouth curled just slightly, not in surprise, not concern, disgust. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she muttered, just loud enough for the man in 2B to hear. He glanced at me, then looked away. I didn't answer. She stepped closer and leaned in, pretending to adjust the overhead bin. "Cleaning crew shouldn't touch leather seats, sis," she said under her breath. I smiled without teeth. "Good morning to you too, Valora." She didn't smile back. "That's first class. You're in the wrong seat." "I'm not." She straightened up. "Boarding pass?" I held out my phone, the screen already showing my digital ticket. She didn't take it, just scoffed. "You always did have a knack for finding back doors." There it was. That tone. The one she used at Mom's funeral when she said, "You're brave for showing up, considering everything." The one she used in front of our father when she made sure he never saw me as anything but the kid who couldn't hold down a job. Passengers were listening now. The man across the aisle, the woman with a baby 2 rows up. I heard the whisper. The tension when a family argument starts unraveling in public. Valora leaned forward again. "You don't belong here." I wanted to laugh. I almost did. Instead, I said calmly, "I paid for the seat." "No, you didn't." "You couldn't have." I stared at her, dead on. And then, because I've lived through this script so many times, I looked away. "You're just a maid," she said, louder this time, making sure everyone heard. "How dare you sit here?" The words hit like spit, sharp, wet, disgusting. My cheeks warmed, but not from shame, not anymore. A little boy across the aisle whispered to his mom, "Why is that lady so mean?" She patted his head and shushed him. The mom glanced at me, pity all over her face. One college-aged girl a few rows back had her phone out, tilted at just the right angle. Valora noticed it too. She turned to the camera and smiled. "Just resolving a seat confusion. We like to keep order." Order. That was rich, coming from the woman who lied her way into our mother's will. I stayed quiet. My hands stayed folded in my lap, but my brain was cataloging every reaction, every face. Valora leaned over, her voice tight. You should get up before I call security. I'm not moving. She laughed, sharp, practiced. You think this makes you brave? I didn't reply. Then, without warning, without ceremony, her hand lifted and slapped me across the face. The cabin gasped. Someone dropped a drink. Another hissed, Jesus! Time went funny, slower, sticky, the way it does in a car crash, or just before someone says something unforgivable at Thanksgiving. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I reached up, not to hit her back, not to defend myself, but to straighten my collar. My hand brushed the silver charm. I thought of Mom, of her fingers braiding my hair when Valora refused to help me get ready for senior pictures, of her voice telling me, you don't need to yell to be right. I opened my purse, pulled out my phone, unlocked it with my thumb. Valora was still standing over me, still breathing hard. The passengers were silent. One call. I tapped it. 3 rings. Then it connected. No greeting, just my voice, even and low. It started. I hung up and leaned back in my seat, the sting on my cheek already fading into something else. Something clean, something steel. 10 minutes, I whispered to myself. 10 minutes. And this plane wouldn't be just a ride home. It would be the start of a reckoning. She thinks I'll walk off this plane. She's wrong. I sat there, hand still resting on the strap of my bag, the phone screen gone dark. Around me, a silence hung that didn't belong on a plane. No whir of conversation, no crinkling snack wrappers, not even the clack of laptop keys. Just stillness. Tense, observant, collective. The slap had landed minutes ago, but the echo of it lingered like heat after a burn. My cheek throbbed in a dull rhythm, not because of the pain, but because of the meaning behind it. I'd been silenced before in private. This time, she'd tried to do it in public. Valora always believed her voice was more valuable than my presence. A flight attendant, not Valora, leaned over from the front galley. She looked younger, maybe mid-20s, and her name tag read Lena. She spoke low, careful, but not quiet enough to hide her shock. You went too far, she whispered to Valora. That wasn't okay. Valora, standing rigid like a soldier caught out of line, turned to her with a smirk that looked more like a flinch. She's my sister, she said too loudly. It's just family drama. She'll be fine. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Because I knew, finally, others were watching too. Behind me, someone muttered, I got it on video. A teenager, judging by the voice. I didn't look. I didn't need to. I knew the video would live on longer than Valora's career ever would. I gently placed my hand on my cheek, not to soothe it, but to remind myself that I was still here. Present. Grounded. I felt the metal of the charm against my skin, the sea that barely shone anymore. My mother's necklace. That chain had hung around her neck in hospital rooms, at church, during Sunday dinners where Valora talked over me like I was part of the wallpaper. Mom used to say, Cece, they'll try to erase you with a smile, but your silence can slice sharper than words, if you let it. I breathed in, slow, long, measured, not to calm down, but to stay precise. That slap wasn't the beginning. It was a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I never got to write. And now, I was editing the whole damn story. As Valora walked back down the aisle, trying to look unaffected, trying to hold her chin high, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window across from me. Her lips were tight, her shoulders squared, but her eyes were jittery. She knew. She didn't know everything, but she knew enough to be afraid. That made 2 of us, but only one of us was ready to act. I pressed the chain into my collarbone gently and let the memory come. The hospital room had smelled of sterile sheets and lavender lotion. Mom hated how hospitals always smelled like bleach and fear, so she made me bring her the little lotion bottle from her dresser. She had just enough strength to hold my hand, not squeeze it, just rest it in hers. Her eyes had gone dull with fatigue, but her voice, still sharp, still her. Valora wants everything shiny, baby, she had said. But you build the things that last. That's harder. But that's legacy. She slipped the chain off her neck and placed it around mine. She won't come, Mom added, more sad than angry. She's got some brand thing in LA. Just don't wait on her anymore. That was the last full conversation we had. The next day, Mom couldn't speak at all. And Valora? She didn't show until 2 days after the funeral. No apology, just a new handbag and a story about how her flight got delayed. Back in the cabin, I tucked the necklace inside my shirt. I wasn't trembling anymore. My hands had steadied. My mind had cleared. The old me would have stood up, gotten off the plane, told myself I didn't need this kind of humiliation. The old me would have cried in the airport bathroom and booked a cheap motel just to breathe. But I'd buried that version of myself years ago, right alongside the woman who raised me to be better than this moment. I sat taller, adjusting the strap of my purse, and felt my phone buzz lightly in response. One vibration, then a second. Confirmation. That call I'd made? It had triggered something. Not public, not yet. But inside. Quietly. Efficiently. The system was moving. I built things to protect people. I coded layers of emergency redundancies into systems that never gave me credit. They ran on my protocols, my architecture. My name might have been deleted from the front-facing roles, but the servers still whispered who really held the keys. I glanced out the window, nothing but runway and the distant shapes of terminals, but I wasn't looking for scenery. I was counting seconds. Valora returned from the galley and started a fake apology tour. "Sorry for the delay, folks," she said, loud enough to fill the first 4 rows. "Sometimes family gets a little heated. You know how sisters are." I didn't respond. Neither did the passengers. She looked down at me again, narrowing her eyes. "Cece, why don't you just move to economy so we can—" I didn't break eye contact, and for the first time in our lives, she blinked first. "No," I said, softly but clearly. Her jaw tightened. "You don't want this to get worse." It already did. She opened her mouth again, but Lena stepped in behind her. She gently tapped Valora's shoulder. "There's a message from corporate on the internal chat," Lena said. Valora's eyes darted to her tablet. "Check it," Lena added, tone firmer than anyone expected from someone that young. Valora turned on her heels and walked away without another word. That's when I finally allowed myself to breathe, not because I was relieved, but because I could already see the dominoes starting to fall. My silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. I didn't watch the screen load, I knew what would appear. My fingers moved with a steady certainty I hadn't felt in years, inputting credentials I'd memorized, even though I hadn't used them since the day I became invisible. Authorization: Cecilia Quinn, System Architect. The confirmation blinked, then gave way to a dashboard only 5 people in the company ever accessed. I had built this interface when the airline was just an ambitious idea pitched in a dusty boardroom in Atlanta. Back then, Valora had no interest in back-end logistics. She wanted lights, camera crews, the shiny veneer of hospitality. Now, she'd learn what the foundation could really do. I tapped a line of commands, then another. Nothing showy. Just one silent domino nudging the next. Execute contingency protocol. Level 3. As the system began its quiet movement, I leaned back, not bothering to close the tablet. I stared out the window again, watching the plane coast through soft clouds. My reflection was faint in the glass, just enough to remind me I still existed. But my mind had already traveled years back. It was a spring morning, 10 years ago. The reading of our mother's will had been scheduled just 3 weeks after we buried her. There was no time to breathe, no time to process. Valora didn't make it, of course. A brand launch in California, she'd said, like Mom had died on purpose to inconvenience her. So I sat alone at the long walnut table, surrounded by lawyers and my father, who looked at me like I was an intern in someone else's company. They called me sweetheart, dear, the quiet one. While shuffling papers I wasn't allowed to read thoroughly. "I know it's a lot," my father said, sliding the stack in front of me. "But it's just a standard adjustment. You'll still have your share. This just formalizes things a little differently. Valora's face is the one people recognize. You understand." At the time, I nodded. I was 30 years old. I had just buried the woman who raised me. I was tired, emotionally wrung out, and still sleeping on her couch because I couldn't bring myself to go back to the apartment I'd moved into the month before she got sick. They gave me Mom's pen to sign with. A vintage fountain pen she used for birthday cards, grocery lists, recipes. I still have it, still refill the ink manually, like she taught me. I remember how my hand trembled holding it. I remember asking, should I have someone look at this first? My father chuckled, like I'd told a cute joke. It's just paperwork, baby. We'll always take care of you. I signed. By the time I learned what I'd signed away, my stake in the back-end systems, my name on the patents, my seat on the board, it was already filed, notarized, and impossible to undo without a lawsuit I couldn't afford to start. From that day on, I became a contract consultant. No credit, no voice, just NDAs, silence, and the slow erosion of identity. Valora stepped into the spotlight as if she'd built the tech herself. Interviews, magazine features, a book deal. All the while, she told everyone I had left to focus on my own thing, when in truth, I'd been pushed into a broom closet and told to be grateful for the storage space. I didn't fight it then, because my mother was gone, because the people left didn't believe I had value, because it's hard to yell when the room has already decided you're mute. But something in me shifted as I sat there in first class, my tablet humming softly beside me. This was not that room. This time, I didn't need anyone's permission to speak. I reached into my purse and pulled out the pen, Mom's pen. I hadn't used it in years, not since that day. I unscrewed the cap and held it between my fingers, the cool metal grounding me. It still worked. It always did. That was the thing about quality craftsmanship. It endured, even if people didn't notice. In that moment, I wasn't the quiet sister. I wasn't the maid Valora loved to mock. I was the woman who built the system they all used, and I was done letting them forget it. I picked up the pen, flipped open my small leather planner, and wrote a single word across the week ahead. Justice. As I recapped it, I felt the familiar vibration from the tablet, a notification from the system confirming Phase 1 of the protocol had been acknowledged by internal compliance. The audit would begin automatically within the next hour. First, they'd notice performance logs weren't syncing. Then security keys would start blinking red. Then, a request for board member credential confirmation would land in Valora's inbox, and she wouldn't have the clearance to answer. It would start small, but they'd feel it. Every single person who helped erase me would feel it. And all of them would know exactly who lit the match. The man across the aisle caught me watching the screen and leaned in slightly. "Everything okay?" he asked, in the cautious tone of someone who had definitely seen the slap but didn't want to get involved. I smiled, soft but firm. "It will be." His eyes flicked to the tablet, then back to me. He gave a small nod and turned away, sensing, correctly, that this wasn't a moment for idle conversation. Valora walked past us again. She didn't look at me, but I saw her shoulders tighten. She felt it too. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need a stage. All I needed was what they never gave me credit for: access, knowledge, precision. And I had all three. I didn't need to say another word, just watching Valora's smile slip, inch by inch, as her tablet buzzed with the message I had just forwarded. That was enough for now. Her hand reached for the device slowly, like it might bite her. She tapped the screen. I knew the exact moment she read the subject line. Her posture stiffened. Her lips parted just slightly. Then came the color, rushing into her cheeks like heat from a slap that finally landed in reverse. A passenger 2 seats back, a woman with kind eyes and travel-worn hands, leaned forward slightly. "Is everything all right, miss?" Valora blinked hard and forced a smile that had no warmth behind it. "Just a little tech glitch," she said. "Nothing to worry about." Glitch. That was always her word when something she couldn't control started unraveling. I glanced down at my own screen. The thread was open, plain as day. The email she had sent 6 months earlier to the PR director and 3 mid-level managers. Subject: media prep. Exclude Cecilia. Content: if she ever flies, put her in economy. Don't comp her. Don't seat her near execs. She's not our image. We can't afford inconsistency. The kind of message people in power send when they're used to not being questioned. When they think there's no record, no one watching, when they assume the person being talked about will never have the keys to the vault, she forgot I built the vault. I didn't even need to forward it beyond the internal contacts, just enough to start the fire, just enough to let the right people know that someone wasn't just holding receipts, but willing to share them. I closed the thread and folded my hands in my lap, waiting. Valora walked past me again, headed toward the galley. Her heels didn't click as confidently this time. One flight attendant, a new one, young, gave her a sideways glance, then turned away before Valora could catch it. The plane itself felt different now, not in turbulence or temperature, but in tone. The passengers weren't whispering anymore, but there was a quiet energy, the kind of stillness that comes when people start realizing something's off and wonder how long before it unravels publicly. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, not to rest, but to remember. 3 years ago, I found that email, buried in a system folder I wasn't supposed to still have access to. It came up in a routine backup, one I was doing as a favor for a junior staffer who'd never met me face to face. I read it once, twice. I remember staring at the words. She's not our image. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there at my small kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen with a coffee gone cold in my hand. That day, I saved the email, not because I planned to use it right away, but because I knew there would be a time, and it wasn't going to be me who came looking for it. They would bring the moment to me, just like today. They always do. Valora returned a few minutes later. Her face looked different now, tighter, drained. She walked up the aisle again but didn't stop at my row, didn't even glance my way. Her smile was gone, so was her certainty. My phone buzzed softly. It was a message from the same internal account that had tipped me off years ago, a name I knew but had never spoken aloud. Saw the email. You finally sent it. About time. I typed back 2 words. Appreciate you. Another ping followed. You're not the only one with files. I didn't reply, but my heart, which had been clenched for most of this flight, loosened just slightly. There was power in not being the only one anymore. There was power in not being alone. A child up front started crying, and a parent tried to soothe them with a toy. Valora walked past them stiffly, muttering something about passenger comfort protocol. I could see her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a napkin she didn't need. The guilt doesn't always show in speeches. Sometimes it leaks out of your fingers when no one's supposed to be looking. I stared at her back and thought about the years I'd let her rewrite our narrative. She always said she was the visionary, the face, the voice. She never mentioned I was the structure, the architect, the one who made sure the house didn't fall. But it was starting to, brick by brick. I opened my phone again, drafted a new message. Subject: Your image just made itself clear. Recipients: Senior Leadership, HR, Compliance. Body: Please see the attached communication from one of your brand representatives. I assume you'll know how to respond from here. Attachment: Valora email, mediaprep.pdf. I hit send and exhaled. No one around me knew the war that just moved 3 steps forward, but I knew, and soon they would too. This was no longer about revenge. This was about correction, alignment, balance. Valora could still wear her uniform and walk the aisle, but the ceiling above her was beginning to crack. And this time, I was the one holding the flashlight. My finger hovered over the screen for just a second longer than it needed to. Send All was lit up in a soft green at the bottom of the draft. One click and the chain would break for good. I tapped it, no fireworks, no music. Just the quiet confirmation. Message sent. It was enough. I slid the tablet back into my bag with the same care I used when folding my mother's sweaters for donation after she passed. Controlled, steady, final. And then I let my hand find its way to the small silver charm resting against my collarbone. I pressed my thumb against it, the way I had 1,000 times when I needed to remember who raised me to survive without applause. You don't need noise to be known, Siti, she'd once told me. Let the world yell. You just keep standing. I let that voice settle deep into my chest like a stone anchoring me. The plane hummed beneath me. Normal. Predictable. But everything above that floor was shifting. I watched Valora out of the corner of my eye as she floated down the aisle again, this time toward me. Her walk didn't have the bounce it did when she first boarded. Something about her looked tentative. I didn't flinch when she stopped next to my seat. Didn't look up at her. Not right away. "I suppose you think you've made your point," she said, voice low, but trying to carry. My gaze met hers, calm. "I haven't even started," I replied. There was no fire in my tone, no raised pitch. I didn't need that anymore. Valora's jaw shifted. She tried to laugh it off, but the edges of her smile frayed. "You're not supposed to be in this seat." I tilted my head. "I'm exactly where I belong." She scoffed, loud enough for a few nearby passengers to hear. "You really think flying first class makes you somebody?" "No," I said, and then turned slightly so my voice carried. "But building the entire infrastructure this airline runs on might." A ripple of stillness moved through the rows. Someone behind me coughed. A man to my right paused with his fork in the air. Valora blinked hard. "You helped with back-end systems. That doesn't mean—" I reached into my purse and pulled out my badge. I didn't flash it dramatically, just held it there between us. The glossy laminate caught the light, illuminating the bold black letters. Cecilia Quinn, Systems Architect, Founding Partner, EtherCorp Holdings. Her face changed, the kind of change that starts in the stomach and rises slowly, visibly, until it hits the skin like a rash of realization. "You erased me," I said, just loud enough. "I'm just putting my name back where it was." I held her gaze, watched her attempt to claw back some control. "I didn't erase anyone," she muttered. But her voice had shrunk. Her shoulders weren't square anymore. Her hands fidgeted at her sides. "You called me a maid, in front of strangers," I reminded her. "You slapped me across the face, publicly. And now you're going to pretend none of that happened?" I was angry. "You blindsided me." "No," I said, firm now. "You didn't expect me to show up in a seat you don't think I deserve. Because you built your entire brand on pretending I didn't exist." She opened her mouth again, but before she could spit out another defense, a voice from across the aisle interrupted us. An older man, gray beard, a cap from a veterans organization on his lap, leaned forward. "She said she built the system," he said, directing his comment to Valora, but his eyes never left me. "Sounds to me like this seat belongs to her more than anyone." A few passengers murmured agreement. Someone clapped once. Awkward, but sincere. Valora backed away. She didn't say another word. She turned and disappeared into the galley without looking back. The air felt different now. I let out a breath, not because I was tired, but because the pressure that had lived in my chest for over a decade had cracked open. It wasn't gone, but it had a vent now. Beside me, the man in the blazer gave me a brief nod, then turned back to his magazine. That was it. No grand applause. No standing ovation. Just truth, finally recognized. I pulled out my tablet again. Not because I needed to start over, but because I was about to finish what should have never been paused. Protocol 2, Cascade Email, Release to Board and Media. I typed the command slowly, with purpose. The first wave had gone out to internal systems, HR, operations, training. This next one, external affairs, news partners, oversight committees. My lawyer, who had been waiting for this for 6 years. I paused for a beat. This time, I wasn't just forwarding receipts. I was letting the world see the difference between curated perfection and covered-up rot. I tapped send. The confirmation beeped quietly, and I whispered to myself, not for show, not for drama, but for the little girl I used to be, who once typed code in a borrowed hoodie while her sister posed for cameras. One more release. The next one won't be quiet. By the time my screen blinked the final confirmation, Stage 2, initiated, I knew I didn't need to watch the rest. It was already moving. My part, at least for now, was done. So I slid the tablet into the side pocket of my tote, leaned back into the seat, and finally let my body settle. The hum of the engines beneath my feet felt louder somehow, like it had tuned itself to my heartbeat. I glanced at the cabin clock. 9:43 a.m. The countdown began. 10 minutes. That's all I'd promised myself. Not to destroy Valora. No. That would have been too easy. This wasn't about her. Not entirely. This was about pulling back the curtain that she, and the company had so carefully drawn to keep people like me invisible. I watched her move across the cabin, clipboard in hand, smile strained but intact. She was still trying, still holding the roll like it hadn't already cracked open, still talking to passengers like nothing was happening. "Would you care for a blanket?" she asked a man in business attire across from me. He declined, his eyes flicking from her face to mine and back. He wasn't sure where to look anymore. At 9:46, I saw Lena, the junior flight attendant, approach Valora with her tablet. She leaned in, whispered something. Valora's face tensed, and for a moment her eyes darted toward me before she masked the movement with a sip of water from her crew bottle. I knew that look. It wasn't just irritation, it was recognition. She knew. The system was no longer hers to steer. She may have worn the uniform, but the engine beneath her feet? That was mine. At 9:48, her corporate phone buzzed. Not the public line, not the one she used for passengers. The internal line, reserved for emergency notifications and executive alerts. She answered it in the galley, voice low but sharp. "What? I don't understand. Wait. No one said anything to me." I caught snippets, even from my seat. "Compliance? On what basis? Who filed this?" Then silence. She didn't move for a moment, just stared at the wall like she was trying to read between the metal panels. At 9:49, Lena re-emerged, her hands lightly shaking. She moved down the aisle slowly and deliberately, eyes scanning the cabin like she was preparing for impact. She wasn't trying to hide it anymore. The crew felt it. Everyone did. At 9:51, I received a push notification. Stage 1, protocol confirmed. Crisis ops en route to B7. I pressed my fingers against the necklace at my collar. I didn't speak, didn't move, just breathed. 2 minutes later, the front door opened mid-flight prep. That never happened. Not during taxi, not during cabin service. Unless something was seriously wrong, and something was. 2 individuals in suits boarded with airport security behind them. They didn't wear badges on lanyards or belts. Their presence alone was identification enough. They walked past row after row without pause. Calm, professional, direct. They stopped in front of Valora. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we need you to gather your things." The words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. They landed like a switch flipped in the cabin air. Valora looked up, stunned. "I'm on duty. You can't just— We're acting under directives from internal risk management and FAA compliance. Please gather your belongings, now." Someone near the front gasped. A phone came up, camera light blinking. A ripple of murmurs moved from row to row, like a current. No one shouted. No one interrupted. I didn't record. I didn't even blink. Valora didn't scream, didn't argue. But I watched as her fingers trembled when she reached for her satchel. She kept her eyes forward, past the crew, past the passengers, refusing to meet anyone's gaze, especially mine. As she was escorted off the plane, the pilot came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're addressing a personnel matter in accordance with federal regulation. We'll be resuming service shortly." There was no sarcasm in his tone, just clarity. Then something I didn't expect. Someone clapped, just once. Then again. And then, quietly, it spread. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a standing ovation. But it was enough. A moment of shared understanding. Not celebration, not spite, just acknowledgement that sometimes people do get held accountable. I looked out the window beside me, not because I needed a view, but because for the first time in years, I saw myself reflected clearly in the glass. I wasn't blurred, I wasn't shadowed, I wasn't invisible. My phone buzzed once more. I opened the message. Stage 2 approved. Full audit inbound. Legal teams en route. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Instead, I just smiled. Quiet and complete. If they buried me, they forgot I was the one who coated the soil. That thought held steady in my chest as the final upload bar reached 100%. The file now lived in multiple internal repositories, the kind of digital breadcrumbs that couldn't be swept under the rug. Training abuse footage, whistleblower reports, suppressed exit interviews. Everything they'd hidden behind polished PR and performance bonuses now had a heartbeat of its own. and it was pulsing straight into the inboxes of people who, until this very moment, pretended not to know my name. I shifted in my seat, cracked my knuckles slowly, and checked the time. 10:08 a.m. Somewhere down at the terminal, the ripple effect had begun. The flight remained airborne, routine and humming, but the ground was already cracking. My screen lit up again with a secure ping from the system. Passenger interviews underway, B7 under active audit. Ops confirming data request sweep. It was a language only a few of us would fully understand. I had designed the entire crisis response framework for this company, its redundancy layers, its escalation logic, its evidence protocols. Back when my name was still on the founding charter, back before Valora decided my face didn't fit the image. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same system they used to erase me was now the one I used to write myself back in. Another alert popped up, this one simpler. Director VP, account deactivated, manual lockout confirmed. I let out a quiet breath, but it wasn't relief. It was something colder, calculated. And then came the ping that made my stomach pause. Incoming. Harold Quinn. My father. For a second, I didn't move. My hand hovered above the screen. Then, with the same careful detachment I used when reviewing legal binders or contract loopholes, I accepted the call. His voice came through tight, clipped, not angry, but annoyed, as though I'd dented the hood of his reputation and the insurance wouldn't cover it. Cecilia, Dad, what in God's name are you doing? I stared at the seat back in front of me. Following protocol. This circus? You're dragging the family through the mud. No, I said, calm but firm. I'm dragging the truth out from under it. He exhaled like I was a child who had spoken out of turn. You've always been too emotional, he said. That's why you never led. You build things, but leadership requires distance, control. I blinked slowly. No, Dad. What you call leadership is really silence, and I've been quiet for a decade. Valora made things work. She knew how to talk to people, how to represent the brand. She kept the family from being embarrassed. I felt it then. The sting wasn't new. It had calcified over the years, but hearing it so directly, especially now, reopened something raw. She lied. She humiliated me. She stole credit for everything I built. She built the image, Cecilia. You built the system. Don't confuse value with visibility. I let a long silence bloom between us. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to say something venomous, but all I did was whisper, "And you helped." The words landed heavier than I expected. I backed the daughter who people believed in, he muttered. I closed the call without saying another word. He didn't call back. I sat still, hands folded tight in my lap. Not trembling, not anymore, just still. He was never going to see me as anything other than the support beam behind Valora's house of mirrors. I looked out the window again, then turned back to my bag. I reached in and pulled out my mother's phone, her old flip model I'd kept all these years. It hadn't powered on in a while. I'd preserved the SIM, backed up the contents. Her final message had been uploaded to the cloud the day she passed. I tapped into the voice notes folder and scrolled to the last entry. Cece, if you're hearing this, I know what they've tried to do. Her voice cracked, but it was strong. I wish I could have done more to stop it. I wish I could have left clearer papers, more protections. But you were always the quiet one. That's your power. They'll underestimate you. They already have. I wiped a tear from the corner of my eye. Not sorrow, just clarity. That's why I taught you how to build, she continued. Charm fades, faces change, but code, systems, that lasts. So if they try to silence you, use what you built. That's the legacy. That's you. The message ended. I closed my eyes for just a moment, then reopened the tablet. A new protocol stared back at me. Protocol 3, Media Trigger, Public Education Release. I didn't tap it yet. Instead, another alert blinked across the screen. Would you like to upload archived training abuse footage to public complaint record? It was a simple question. Behind it, hours of documented mistreatment, flight attendants screamed at for not wearing enough makeup. Gate agents ridiculed for accents. Older staff pushed out under the guise of rebranding. All swept under a rug stitched together with NDAs and spin. I stared at the prompt, my finger hovering. Then I clicked, yes. The upload began. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never really had been. The cabin was still dimly lit when I reopened the secure channel on my tablet. The sun outside had risen, filtering faint orange light through the window beside me. In that glow, I could see dust suspended in air, dancing quietly, almost mockingly, around Valora's now vacant seat. I tapped into the live boardroom feed. The screen flickered once, then resolved into a tidy, sterile conference room. Not on this plane, not even in this terminal, but thousands of miles away in the high-rise headquarters of EtherCorp, the parent company, the real ones in charge. 3 board members sat at a long glass table, backlit by daylight and framed with silence. No greetings, no small talk. They knew why I called. I adjusted my posture, angled the camera, and began speaking. Not with emotion, not with apology, just truth. This isn't about an upgrade, I said clearly, ensuring my voice didn't quiver. It's about a system that made it easier to bury contributions than confront bias. A system that rewarded charisma and punished competence. That allowed image to silence substance. No one interrupted. Today, I was assaulted on your flight by your lead crew member, who also happens to be my sister. The same sister your executives elevated because she photographed better, spoke smoother, and, most importantly, knew how to use my silence as a stepping stone. I paused. Her name is Valora Kane. You know it well, but you may not recall mine. I held up my ID badge, letting the camera focus. Cecilia Quinn, systems architect, founding partner. The person who designed your logistics spine and authored the original crisis response protocols you're now watching unfold. Still silence from the room, but I could feel the shift through the screen. The sharp inhale someone tried to stifle. The twitch in the chair leg of the man to the left. It wasn't shock. They'd known. They'd just counted on me staying quiet. Too late. One of them finally spoke. Ms. Quinn, we acknowledge receipt of the incident reports and media files submitted. We're prepared to offer a formal public apology, financial restitution, and, if you're willing, a platform to speak about diversity and integrity across our branches. A stage. They were offering me a microphone and a PR tour, but I wasn't looking to talk. I don't want a stage, I said simply. I want reform. Another pause. I let it hang. I want every executive who signed off on the erasure of my name off the board. I want every HR head who buried complaints under team cohesion protocols removed, and I want Valora Kane permanently banned from representing, working for, or contracting with any brand under your umbrella. The chairman looked at someone off-screen, clearly receiving a real-time legal opinion. Do you have proof of intentional suppression? I smiled. You're already watching it. He nodded once, slowly. We'll begin formal removals immediately. I didn't thank them. I didn't smile. Instead, I opened the staff access interface, one I still had remote admin clearance to. One by one, the names turned gray. Vice President, Ground Operations, access revoked. Executive Director, Brand Communications, account disabled. Valora Kane. Permanent ban, processed. On a separate screen, I saw a CNN affiliate camera pan over Valora outside the terminal. She stood behind tinted sunglasses, arms folded tightly. A reporter shoved a mic toward her. I built this brand, she said, voice shaky. She was just back-end. Her words, as always, polished on the surface and rotted underneath. But the public had already shifted. Headlines began to scroll. Fall of a Queen. Rise of the Quiet Architect. In a thread that was already climbing Twitter's trending topics, a flight attendant named Carla posted, I was told to hide my accent, to wear heavier makeup, to never sit during breaks. Valora called me non-camera ready on my 3rd day. Cecilia's not just clearing her name, she's clearing space for all of us. Another post from a former gate agent read, she said what we never could. And then came the final blow. The video. I uploaded it without hesitation. A recorded training session, captured 3 years ago. Valora was in front of the class, arms crossed. We need perfect teeth. No tattoos, no old jewelry, no scuffed shoes. We don't want anyone asking, is this woman tired, sick, or just low class? That's not our brand. The room in the video was quiet, too quiet. Like even then, they knew something was wrong. I didn't need to say anything. The footage spoke louder than any press release. Thousands of comments flooded in within minutes. She bullied us in silence. Every line she said, I heard it with my own ears. We worked in the dark. She got the spotlight. Finally, someone flipped the switch. The momentum wasn't mine alone anymore. And that was exactly the point. I sat quietly, rereading the notifications as they flooded in. Resignations, internal memos, emergency PR drafts being leaked. Then, one final alert from legal. You are no longer bound by the 2014 NDA. Record expunged. All proprietary acknowledgments reinstated. I stared at that line for a long moment, then deleted the file myself. It didn't need to exist anymore. I didn't need permission to tell my story. As the plane began to descend into Atlanta, the city skyline rose ahead through the soft layer of cloud. The sun had climbed higher, warmer now, stretching across the tarmac and casting long shadows behind us. I reached into my bag, pulled out a notepad, and for the first time in years, wrote my full name at the top of a clean sheet. Cecilia Quinn. Then I crossed out the next line, consultant, back-end logistics, and replaced it with architect, rebuilder, quiet storm. The collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't the kind of explosive undoing people expect from scandal. It unfolded like paper burning from the corner inward, slow, quiet, irreversible. And when it was done, there was no ash left to sweep, just space. 1 year later, I stood in Concourse A of Hartsfield-Jackson International, not with a suitcase or a boarding pass, but with a simple envelope in my hands and a small speech folded inside it. The terminal had changed, or maybe I had. The same walls, same announcements buzzing from overhead, same scent of too strong coffee near Gate 12. But nothing about it felt hostile anymore. No shadows hovered behind my steps. No eyes followed me, questioning why I was there. Because now, they all knew. I made my way to a modest stage set up near the windows that overlooked the runway. Nothing flashy, just a small platform with chairs for a few media reps, a banner that read, The Quinn Initiative Launch, and a microphone that I requested stay turned off unless the press insisted. I wasn't there to perform. I was there to pass something forward. I stepped up to the podium as invited guests found their seats, leaders in aviation safety, former airline staff, 2 young women sitting up front who looked about 20 and nervous. They were the first recipients of the new fund we'd created. Daughters of single mothers who worked in custodial services, women who, like my own mother, were rarely thanked and often forgotten. The envelope I held contained their scholarship awards, as well as hand-signed letters from me. I didn't talk long. I didn't need to. This isn't a redemption arc, I said softly. No microphone needed. This is a correction. For every person who was ever told, you're not the right look, or stay out of the way. For every woman who cleaned floors while others claimed the spotlight, you were always enough. You just weren't seen. The crowd didn't applaud. They just listened, and that meant more. After the ceremony, I walked through the terminal slowly, not out of sentiment, but because I finally could. Without pressure behind my ribs, without Valora's voice in my head, mocking my steps, without the sting of invisibility. Near Gate A27, a little girl with thick braids and a purple backpack stood in front of one of the digital kiosks that displayed rotating employee profiles and historic contributors to the company. She was staring at the screen. When I approached, she turned toward me. Her eyes were wide, not with awe, but with that honest curiosity children carry without apology. "Are you the lady whose name is up there?" she asked, pointing to the screen. My photo wasn't glamorous. It wasn't staged. It was from 10 years ago in a lab coat, smiling over a line of code on a whiteboard. I knelt so I could look her in the eye. "Yes," I said. "It took a long time to get there." She nodded, satisfied. "My mom said you built the smart stuff, not the pretty stuff." I chuckled. "That's true." She grinned, then ran off to catch up with her family. I stood up slowly and watched her disappear into the flow of travelers, and I realized in that moment, I didn't need the whole world to know me, just enough people, the right people. From a distance, I saw Valora. She didn't see me right away. She was wiping down a counter in the lobby of a small private clinic attached to the concourse, those hybrid lounges they use for airport health services. Her uniform was plain, no name tag. Her posture was quiet, not defeated, but reserved. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vengeance, just a still kind of closure. A former flight attendant walked by, someone who used to laugh at Valora's jokes in the break room, who once told me, "You should smile more, it'll help you get promoted." She caught sight of Valora, hesitated, and walked past without a word. Valora looked up, eyes flicking toward her, then toward me. For one suspended breath, our eyes locked. There was no nod, no smirk, no apology. Just an understanding. We had both lost something, but only one of us had earned what we kept. I turned away first, not out of pride, but because I didn't need anything more from her. That chapter had closed the moment I wrote my own name back into the story. Later that night, back home, I sat in my small office, the one that still had Mom's sewing box in the corner and her framed "You Are Enough" sticky note taped to my desk lamp. I pulled up the new internal site the company launched last week, a living digital archive honoring women in systems development, policy reform, and whistleblower protection. I scrolled slowly, then saw it. Cecilia Quinn, Systems Architect, Founding Partner, Co-Creator, the Quinn Protocol's Legacy Contributor, Internal Equity Infrastructure. I reached up and touched the silver necklace now resting visibly against my blouse. I used to hide it. Now I let it catch the light. Not because the charm changed, but because I had. I logged out of the archive and turned off the lamp. Not everyone who gets erased finds their way back. I knew that. I knew how rare it was to survive the silencing and still choose to speak. But I also knew what my mother whispered once. You don't have to be loud to be remembered. You just have to leave something they can't rewrite. And I had. Sometimes it's not the loudest voice that changes the system, it's the one that refuses to stay silent any longer. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about legacy, quiet strength, and reclaiming what was stolen in the shadows. So now I'll ask you, have you ever been erased? Not by strangers, but by your own family? Tell me in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more truth coming, chapter by chapter.